A couple amazing facts. How many of you know how many years the pastor's been working for the church? Anybody know? 600 and... Thank you, Jeff. 51 years. 51 years. What a life of service. Amen. So if you see him, thank him for his service for the church. Another amazing fact, I've been here 25 years. This is the first time I've ever done scripture reading. So, and I didn't know I was going to do it today. Chuck asked me to do it. Thank you, Chuck. I've always wanted to. Can somebody here tell us what the word sola scriptura means? Only the Bible. Yeah, the Bible and the Bible only. Can you repeat after me? Sola scriptura? Our text today is from Psalms 19, 1-2. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, and night unto night reveals knowledge. Sola scriptura.
Hello, church. Today's sermon is called One in a Googol, God's Wonder in an Impossible World. So, here is an introduction. The purpose of this sermon today is to inspire wonder within all of us. I'm not here on this pulpit to provide a philosophical debate, but only to apply physical numbers to back up arguments. It is easy to say that life spawning in from nothing billions of years ago, from nothing but primordial soup, is unlikely. But with the general statement, how easy is it to say the same thing about God? This sermon is meant to call attention to just how amazing life is on this earth, just how complex it all is. As David said in Psalms 139, verse 14, I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. God created Adam out of dust with intention, and he did not let randomness take hold. And for that, I will attempt to demonstrate just how grateful we should be. Let's go ahead and start by defining life. How would we recognize what is living and what is not? The scientific definition of life has 4 criteria. It must be able to reproduce, adapt, respond to external stimuli, and regulate itself. This definition separates us from the rocks. It separates viruses from bacteria. Without it, who's to say whether those rocks are living? Who's to say whether this pulpit is alive? This is what we can base our conclusions on. If we observe all 4 of these things happening within something, it is living. Let's go ahead and go back to the schoolroom for a moment. These terms will help you to understand, hopefully, what I'm going to be talking about. To start, we have our DNA. It's in every single one of us. It's always unique. And it tells us how to behave. It holds the instructions for our cells, tells them when to turn on, and what proteins to produce. Nucleic acids are all the individual molecules that make up that long strand of DNA. A base pair is 2 of those molecules that are bonded together. A gene is all parts of your DNA. It can be anywhere from hundreds to millions of base pairs, all in one group. Probability is a math formula, and it is the number of attempts at something divided by the total chance of that said thing. For example, if you have 4 cups and 1 ball under one of them, and you pick up 3 of the cups, you have a 3 in 4 chance that you found the ball. 3 attempts of picking up the cups divided by 4 total possibilities. Finally, there are factorials. As an example, if you have 5 different colored cups, how many placement combinations exist if you have 5 places to put them? You have to you place the first cup in any of the 5 places. The next one only has 4 to go, but it can be in any of the 4. The third has 3, then 2, then 1. So, to figure out your total number of combinations, you have 5 for all 5 positions, times 4 options, multiplied by 3, multiplied by 2, multiplied by 1. It gives you the total number of possible orders there are for all of those different cups, which it would be 120 different orders. The official definition of a factorial is a number multiplied by that number minus 1, multiplied by that number minus 1, all the way down to 1. And it is used to determine how many combinations there are in a set of items. I promise all of this will be useful. The Earth itself is nigh on impossible to have just happened to be where it is. As the Earth was forming, following the atheistic point of view for the sake of argument, it was originally much closer to the center of our galaxy. It allowed for the collection of the heavy elements and metals that we need, such as gold and iron. Without those, we would die. Life would not be possible. However, the radiation from the black hole that exists at the center of our galaxy, at that point, it would have been too high to even allow life to exist. Anything that appeared would have been destroyed immediately. So, after it gained all the necessary elements, the solar system was ejected from its birth cluster of stars out towards where it lies now, away from the radiation of the galactic center. However, if we had kept going, gone too far out, we would have frozen and life would not be possible. That we have landed just where we are is already a miracle. Let us define evolution. Evolution is the slow changing of DNA over massive periods of time, leading to the development of new species and adaptation. The theory states that any bad genetic mutation will die out, while good ones will thrive. On the micro level, this is correct. For example, about 68% of the world's population is lactose intolerant. However, only a few thousand years ago, the number was much closer to 95%. That is a very small change, and it still took thousands of years. In fact, the only difference between me being lactose intolerant and my friend not is one single gene that remains on past childhood. It is not even creating anything new. It is simply telling a gene to remain on. And it still took thousands of years. In fact, I already said that. If it took thousands of years simply to tell a gene to remain on past childhood, how long would it take to evolve into an entirely new species? Evolution is not feasible on a large scale. However, some believe that God guided evolution, interpreting the days of creations as billions of years in which God caused the proper genes to change and to form, to allow humanity and intelligence to form. This directly goes against the Bible. As per Genesis 2:17, "But you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die." If death was already a regular occurrence, as it must be in evolution, then the threat of death from eating of the tree is irrelevant. Inversely, because the threat of death does exist, death does not exist before Adam and Eve eat the forbidden fruit. And evolution, by its nature, requires death to occur. Therefore, evolution and creationism are mutually exclusive. There can be no overlap between them. From the atheistic point of view, the Earth was formed out of dust surrounding the sun approximately 4.6 billion years ago. That's quite a long time. At this point, it was molten rock and lava, completely inhospitable to life. 4.3 billion years ago, supposedly, it could have hosted life. The latest that life could have formed was 3.7 billion years ago, when the earliest fossils of microbes are said to be dated. This leaves us a 600 million year window from the Earth possibly being habited to when we supposedly know it was habited. That life must have formed somewhere in that period. Let's go ahead and skip to the simplest organism possible. Well, not possible, but that we have. In 1995, a group of researchers at J. Craig Venter Institute set out to build the simplest organism. However, to start on this, they had to find the simplest natural life form. This happened to be a bacteria living in goats called Mycoplasma mycoides, and it became the basis of their research and experimentation. To accomplish this, which is to say, to accomplish creating a simpler life form, they, through a series of trial and error, would remove a gene from the bacteria's DNA sequence and see if the bacteria died. If it didn't, they would remove the next one. And if the bacteria did die, they knew the gene was necessary, and they would switch back to the previous generation of bacteria, which included the gene that they now knew was necessary to survive. They would repeat these steps until they identified every gene necessary for the bacteria to survive. Now, any remaining gene that was removed would kill the bacteria, and all genes which had been removed were unnecessary for the bacteria's survival. They ended up with a bacteria starting from Mycoplasma mycoides with about 900 genes. They ended with a bacteria that they named JCVI Syn 3.0, and it had only 473 genes. So they almost halved the number of genes. And it also had approximately 531,000 base pairs. For context, our human genome has 3.1 billion base pairs and more than 20,000 genes. Compared to the 473, this number is pretty big. However, as a result of the bacteria's small DNA, all it can do is eat, reproduce, and expel waste. However, it does meet our requirements for life. So this is our simplest organism that we have on this earth. Let's go ahead and do some math. We're going to use these terms that we just learned. So JCVI Syn 3.0 has 473 genes, comprised of 531,000 base pairs, which is what I've told you. As you recall, a base pair is two bonded nucleic acids. The 531,000 base pairs are all separate molecules. Like the colored cups, they can be in any order. Therefore, the total number of possible combinations is 531 factorial, and only one of those combinations out of the 531,000 factorial will work. Now, there are supposedly 600 million years, let me go back a little bit. This is a massive number. 10 factorial, which is far smaller than 531,000 factorial, is already 3,628,800. And factorials only grow exponentially. So you can hardly imagine 531,000 factorial. There are supposedly 600 million years that we have for life to form. As we discussed earlier, so the first cells must have spontaneously, through sheer chance of the proper molecules being formed, and in the correct place, and a bolt of lightning or some such event causing these molecules to combine just so and create a cell sometime in that 600 million years. Let us be extremely generous and assume that not only are all the proper nucleic acids formed and in the proper position to potentially bond, but that the rest of the cell is immediately ready to form as soon as that DNA has been. Let's also assume that there's one combination of DNA being attempted every single second for 600 million years straight. This is extremely generous, and it would likely never happen. We would be lucky to have this attempt happen once. For the sake of argument, let's say by some miracle, it does happen like this. To calculate these odds, we take our probability formula, which is our number of attempts, and divide it by our total number of possibilities. At one attempt of forming the DNA per second, we have 18,921,600,000,000,000,000 attempts over the 600 million years, divided by the 531,000 factorial possibilities of arrangements of DNA. This comes out to the astronomical, does anyone want to take a guess? 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, 10,000, a million? A little bit bigger than that. So this number probably evokes some, wow, that's probably a big number, but I have no idea what it means. So what this number is 1.565 times 10 to the power of negative 2,809,402. Now, if you don't know scientific notation, the way it works is if you have a positive exponent, that number is really big. If it has a negative exponent, that number is really small. And this so happens to have a negative exponent. So this number is so very incredibly small. I'm going to provide a couple of examples for you. So this number is the possibility of a single strand of DNA, just one strand of DNA, forming from the simplest organism on this earth. Now, the title of this sermon is one in the Google. I made a mistake in my earlier whenever I submitted that title, so this is not correct. A googol is one with 100 zeros, and if I'm remembering correctly, if you were to stack that many pennies, it would be 1.5 times the size of the observable universe, which is pretty big. And this number, rather than being 1 in a googol, is 1 in 27.8 thousand times a googol, which is considerably smaller. I want you to think, while we go over to the next slide, about this number. So, this is a calculator that I used, big number calculator. Should be able to do some pretty big numbers. It says, please provide a valid X value. It broke. Couldn't do it. Here's the next calculator that I attempted to use. It ignored the exponent and just returned the same number that I used. Obviously, the number is quite a bit smaller than 1.565. This is a calculator that is basically unlimited. And it gave me the number name of 0. This number is so close to 0, it is functionally the same. That's why the calculators can't calculate it. It is essentially the same as 0. So this number is so impossibly small that for all intents and purposes, as I stated, a couple times, it's 0. For some context, 10 to the power of negative 6 is 1 in a million. In the entire observable universe, there are 10 to the power of 80 atoms. This number is so small that it is impossible to comprehend. The Planck length, which is the smallest possible size that we can measure, according to our current, math, is, let me see if I can find one. It is only 1.6 times 10 to the power of negative 35. To put that number into perspective, the Planck length, if an atom were the size of the entire universe, the Planck length would be the size of an atom. And this number is quite a bit smaller than 10 to the power of negative 35. This is only the possibility of a single strand of DNA from the simplest organism on Earth to form randomly over 600 million years. This is also assuming that one combination of this DNA is tried every single second. It does not include the rest of the cell. This is only for the DNA. Even if, against all odds, this cell somehow formed, it would die from lack of food. This bacteria cannot use the sun. It cannot use heat for energy. It would die because it needs to eat organic matter. And on a barren earth, there is none. So we are fearfully and wonderfully made, are we not? So let's assume that against all odds, somehow this cell forms. Against the googles and septillions of chances that it has. So let's say it manages to be photosynthetic, so it can use the sun, and it manages to reproduce and grow. There are many more challenges. Genetic mutation, which is how evolution must work, there's no other way, is rare. And most of the time when it occurs, it is bad. Think of things like Down syndrome, type 1 diabetes, certain types of autism and cancer. All of these are caused by genetic mutations. even quote-unquote good mutations, such as muscle hypertrophy, which can lead to increased strength due to a lack of proteins that suppress your muscle building, would be bad in the supposed caveman days where we have a lot less food. That sort of disorder would cause someone to have a massive appetite, which is not good when you're living on mushrooms that you can find on the ground. Even the chance of a disorder occurring is low due to the natural DNA repair systems all living organisms have. Even this super small bacteria that is the simplest organism on Earth, the majority of its DNA is for making sure that its DNA stays intact. On the rare chance of one occurring, it would likely cause bad consequences. By the time a good genetic mutation comes around and it's not fixed by the bacteria's already natural DNA repair systems, how many thousands or millions of years might it have been? With that logic, we should be nothing but microbes on the ground. With the human genome being more than 3.1 billion base pairs long, the organism, this bacteria, would have to develop one codon, which is 3 base pairs all in one, every 3.7 years, just to have the total number of DNA that we have, just to match us, which is not likely, And yet there are organisms who have so much more DNA than even we do. Yet here we are. I can only say this is because of our Creator. In Jeremiah 18, verse 6, God said, "Look, as the clay is in the potter's hand, so are you in my hand." Even if evolution were to, against all odds, against every single thing fighting against it, manage to somehow produce humanity, how do we know that we are rational if we are made of randomness? Evolution doesn't care about rationality. It doesn't care about truth. It cares about survival. If it is more beneficial for the human mind to imagine there are patterns where there are none, why should it not? If it is more beneficial for a human to imagine that there is day and night to regulate sleep, why should that not be the case? Why would evolution not allow that? By that logic, how do we know that the sun and the moon is real? What if it's just evolution saying, hey, you need to go to sleep, and it's all in our heads? How are we to know? If it is more beneficial for a human to imagine that they are freezing when they are only a little cold, why should they not? If we are a product of evolution, how can we trust anything that we see? Why should we, if we were a product of random chance, be able to produce something that is not random? A gambler who counts cards is considered trying to make patterns out of the randomness of a shuffling of a deck, which may very well be useless. Has any of you ever? Well, probably not here. But it's useless to try to see patterns in nothing, in randomness. By that logic, who are we, who are supposedly random, to look at the universe and see patterns? If we are, how do we see gravity? How do we see time and seasons in years? If we are random, why don't we act random? To say that randomness can produce order is to say that a gambler counting cards can win big. It is utterly impossible. Therefore, we must have been created by an intelligent mind, by something giving us purpose and order, rather than by the chaos of the universe. I must address one thing. Have any of you ever heard of the monkey on a typewriter theorem? One person. Okay, good. Well, my explanation won't go to waste then. So, it is the idea that given enough time, a monkey, typing randomly on a typewriter, will type out the complete works of Shakespeare. Now, given enough time, anything is possible. And the monkey will eventually type out Shakespeare. It is true. Not by any product of its own mind, or the monkey suddenly developing the capacity to understand and write out Shakespeare, but simply through random chance of it typing on the keyboard. However, for a monkey to write out the complete work of Shakespeare by typing randomly, it would take them 4.1206 times 10 to the power of 5,660,319 years. Now, I'm pretty sure that's actually even a little bit bigger than our chance for life to form. So, this number is absolutely massive. I calculated the other numbers. I didn't actually calculate this one. I found it online. But the person who calculated it also divided it by the amount of time that the universe has supposedly existed, which is 13.7-something billion years. And it was still an absolutely massive number. I don't remember what it was, but it still had a huge exponent. And that was in terms of how many times the universe could exist before a monkey would type out Shakespeare. Now, this argument is often used as an argument for atheists for evolution, that given enough time, anything can happen. On its own, this is perfectly true. Eventually, if you spend 1,000,000 years with a bottle of water and a drop of dye, it might consolidate into a dot through random chance. It might group into one area, all that dye. But to say that a monkey can type Shakespeare in the 600 million years that we have from Earth being habitable to definitely having life is impossible, the same way it is for life, even more so. In the end, through mathematics and probability, I have given, I hope, some true numbers for simply the purpose of instilling in you the wonder of God. He is truly amazing for creating us to be so balanced. There is so much more proof, along with what I have already shown, that the planets remain stable in their orbits and the stars don't pass close enough to pull us away from the sun, that our biological system is perfectly balanced to keep us alive, that the Higgs field is held in place and doesn't collapse. All of these things declare the glory of God. Our scripture today said that the heavens themselves declare the glory of God, that the firmament declares his handiwork. We can see this ourselves. The gravity that holds the stars in place above us and allows them to fuse and shine so brightly for him. The firmament with the clouds that through the water system and the trees and the surface tension that allow these things to exist show his love for us and his ability to do the impossible. To finish the rest of that segment of scripture, there is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth and their words to the end of the world. Psalms 19, 3-4. Now, as we go into our final song, our closing song, I pray that you will all have a blessed Sabbath.